From Washington to Moscow, New York to Paris, Rome to Jerusalem, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. Stand by for J.R. Church and today's Prophecy in the News.
Is there behind the scenes an Illuminati? A secret clique of wealthy men masterminding a massive conspiracy to rule the world? That's the question that opens this book, Dark Majesty, written by Texe Mars. Texe Mars is with us in the studio today, and Texe is the author of Millennium, Peace Promises in the Day They Take Our Money Away. He also wrote America Shattered, Unmasking the Plot to Destroy Our Families and Our Country. He wrote the book New Age Cults and Religions. He wrote Ravaged by the New Age. He wrote a bestseller, Mystery Mark of the New Age, and his all-time bestseller, Dark Secrets of the New Age, and the book Megaforces as well, an author from Austin, Texas. Texe, thanks for coming to be with us on today's Prophecy in the News.
Glad to be with you, J.R.
Now, you have asked the question in this book, is there behind the scenes an Illuminati? So I'll pose the question to you.
Well, certainly, J.R., there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that there is a secret, hidden clique of very rich, very powerful and influential men who are controlling this world behind the scenes. Now, up until just the last decade or so, they did not have total control, but they've been grasping after it. And it seems that we're on the very precipice of an incredible event in human history.
A quantum leap in politics?
It is a quantum leap in not only politics, but involving the world economy, the American dollar, the American financial system, really the pocketbooks of everyone listening to us. And I'll even go so far as to state this. Anyone who reads Dark Majesty would be shocked at the spiritual and religious dimensions of this world conspiracy.
You know, you said in your, you called them Dark Majesty and a Secret Brotherhood in your book. This word majesty here is fascinating to me because you opened the book in the preface with this verse of Scripture from Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings to search out a matter. I thought that was quite fascinating because it is true that it is the nature of God to conceal things and hide things in His Word. If men couldn't find things that only a God could put in His Word, then we wouldn't know that a God wrote it.
That's right.
You see, and of course when I say a God, I mean the one and only God. There's no other book in all the world written like this Bible is written with things hidden in them. Now, there is a royalty, if you please, for we who know the Lord Jesus Christ as our Savior are of a royal priesthood. And it says here, it is the honor of kings to search out a matter. But even though there are things that God has hidden in the Bible and we search them out, there's also a dark majesty as well, isn't there?
There is a dark majesty. You know, even Paul himself, through the inspiration of God in the Scriptures, labeled, or you might say bequeathed, almost, Satan the title of the prince, the Black Prince. Very dark, very opposite of the light, but he comes as the light, and his kingdom comes as the light. But I want people to know, in my book, that I don't call it the light. They do. That is their main focus, to talk about solar man, the solar tradition, the great power of light. But it is a very dark majesty we're talking about. The secret brotherhood comes disguised as something so wonderful for us, a new world order, a world government, harmony among all religions. But in fact, the secret brotherhood is about as dark and shadowy a group as we could ever discover.
I guess it's the Darth Vader of all mankind, huh?
You know, it is the Darth Vader. And the amazing thing about this dark group is, to the average person in the world, those who don't know Jesus Christ, J.R., it is shrouded in mystery because Paul told us. You'll recall in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that literally this conspiracy that will envelop the whole world in the last days, Paul said, he epitomized it by saying it is the mystery of iniquity. And there's a strong delusion. So people absolutely do not know that they're in darkness, that there is a dark, majestic group that are controlling everything that they think, that they do, their family lives, and hopefully we're going to expose that dark majesty group today.
Mm-hmm. On page 19 of your book, you wrote, 9 men now rule the world, and you give the 3 objectives for the New World Order: a new world economy, a new world government, and a world religion. 9 men. Is that all?
Isn't it amazing? This number 9 keeps coming back. You know, you and I have discussed the occult numerology here. Now, we know, of course, God has numbers that he uses in the Bible. But the occult world, again, here we have the counterfeiting and the misuse, even the abuse of, you might say, biblical mathematics.
Yeah.
The number 9 is a powerful occult number. And it doesn't surprise me nor you, J.R., that these occultists, this satanic conspiracy in the last days, world conspiracy, some of the top leaders of government, men whose names, I mean, people would shake if they knew they were involved in this, that they would compose themselves ultimately as an executive council of 9 powerful men. Now, interestingly enough, from what I've been able to discover and document in Dark Majesty, these 9 men are expecting a 10th to join their ranks very soon. So there will be 10 men. But right now there are 9 men, but I want to hasten to state that these are the, you might say, the premier 9 men who are controlling this globe behind the scenes. World governments, choosing, picking our world leaders, perhaps even the Democratic Party, Republican Party leaders in America today. But the fact is there's more than 9 people involved in this conspiracy. Below that 9, there is a second level, a little bit lower in the hierarchy, of around 200 very powerful world leaders spread in the United States, in Europe, and even in Asia. But below that, there are at least several thousand. I don't have an accurate number, but there are several thousand people who know of this conspiracy, who are involved deeply in it, but they may themselves not even know the identity of the 9 on the Executive Council. But they are part of it. Sometimes they only have a part of it. In other words, they're not conversant. They're not understanding of the total. But there are several thousand. So you have the 9, you have about 200 that sit on a committee, you might say, underneath that, an executive committee. And then below that, there are several thousand. Now, under that, there are untold numbers. I talk about in Dark Majesty, there's a new directory that recently, an encyclopedia of associations that recently was published by a very strange arcane group in France. And it lists 25,000 organizations and groups. I believe these are front organizations. We're talking about the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, World Goodwill, Lucis Trust, but there are thousands of organizations. And JR, unfortunately, there are many, many millions of people involved in these front organizations that have no idea whatsoever.
Good people, but
they're
naive.
being controlled. They're very naive, and actually many of them are very sincere. They have humanitarian goals. They think maybe the United Nations should be given power over the whole globe. The United States, its sovereignty and independence should be ended for the good of all, or that the riches of the West should be distributed to the poor. So sometimes, and maybe to clean up the environment, we need to have a world government that can police it. So there are all altruistic goals, seemingly of a good sort. But these are the same kind of humanitarian yearnings and altruistic motives that are going to be used by these world conspirators to manipulate men's minds and eventually seize control of all things.
You know, it's interesting to me, your use of the number 9, because 9 in the Hebrew language means serpent. It is the 9th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's a single letter, and it is a word in Hebrew.
And it's the
it means
9th
serpent.
letter.
Yes, the 9th letter.
Here again we have the 9th letter, and it means serpent.
In 1118, when Hughes de Payen organized the Knights Templar, there were originally 9 knights who went to Jerusalem and lived on the Temple Mount for 9 years. While it is thought they dug up the temple treasure and came back to Europe wealthy beyond belief and began to loan gold to governments and establish an international banking cartel. In fact, today in London, In the financial district of London, where sits the Bank of England and its dozen or so subsidiary banks from various nations, right in the center of that 22 acres sits the Church of the Knights Templar. They own the land, they own the banks. In fact, Albert Pike once wrote in Morals and Dogma, nearly 100 years ago or so ago, he wrote, "The Knights Templars' goal was to become wealthy and buy the world." That's exactly what they have done.
Isn't that interesting? And of course, here we have this intergenerational, a continuation of this conspiracy over the centuries. You know, you wrote a very powerful book, Guardians of the Grail, that brought this you might say, hidden dynasty all the way, traced it up to our modern time. And that's what also I've done. I've continued in Dark Majesty, and I am convinced that God wants his people to know these things, J.R. But we've continued to look at this group called the Knights Templar. And then, as you know, and you've documented before and had programs about this, along in the early 1300s, Jacques de Molay, the head of the Knights Templar, was put to death.
Yes.
He was accused of everything from sodomy to treachery and revolt against King Philip the Fair of France and all of those things.
And the bottom line is they want to get rid of him.
They wanted his money, right?
So who cares what the reasons are that they used to burn him at the stake, but they did indeed burn him at the stake.
They did indeed. Then in 1717, after many centuries of being underground, these groups began to resurface again in a different format with new names.
Yes.
We had the United Lodge over in Great Britain, the Grand Orient Lodge in France.
25,000 organizations developed out of this original Priori of Zion and Knights Templars group that had set out a design to take over the world and establish a one world government. Incredible. On page 33, you talk about the three directives of the secret brotherhood. The prime directive being, you said, the glory of the one shall be paramount. Unity out of diversity. Explain that. E pluribus unum. Well,
you know, that is one of the mottos, you might say, of American. It's on our currency. You have to understand that Satan has this insane goal of controlling everything. We read in Isaiah where Lucifer boasted that he would ascend his throne, take over the Most High. And so he has been given a limited authority on earth today, but he has far greater vain ambitions. His real goal is to bring everything together as one. Now, first of all, he's got to do that on planet Earth, and that is this mystery of iniquity, the world conspiracy that has mushroomed now and is in its final stages and is bringing together all the world's leaders, the world economy, the world's religions, false teachings, and so forth. So the glory of the one. Now, that is what is happening. The great unity movement, world government, world economy, world religion.
Basically, that's a part of Hinduism, isn't it? That God is everything and we are a part of the whole.
It is, and it's New Age too. So, because it all proceeds out of this root of Satanism. What we have is like an octopus, many thousands of tentacles, but they're all controlled by a central headquarters, by a great head, you might say, or a body.
Now, when the devil institutes his mark of the beast in the right hand of the forehead, basically everyone will have to submit to that, and then they will effectively be a part of the whole. Everything will be one then, won't it?
They will indeed. Now, the most amazing thing about this is that the secret brotherhood that we expose in Dark Majesty, the secret brotherhood, J.R., is not going to have to use a stick and knock people over the head. We're not talking about Hitler and the rebirth of Hitler in terms of the overt. There may be no crystal knights, so to speak, as happened in Germany. But there are a series of wars and world crises that are now being precipitated, I believe. People are going to cry out, we've got to get together. Look at what is happening in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Russia, the republics. There's wars, the Muslims, Islam, and the Jews. And people are crying out now, we've got to have peace. We've got to stop this turmoil in Yugoslavia and the bloodshed and death and brutality. So here, what is the answer? World government. Give the United Nations a military force. To clean up the environment, we've got to have a world system. So everything has to be one. Now, that's the first directive then. But as you just mentioned, there are 3 prime directives of the secret brotherhood.
Yeah, and the second one is?
The second one is, if everything will be one, the secret brotherhood must have the means to control the one.
Control it. Incredible. And the third, that the many must never, ever realize that they themselves are not in control of their own destiny. That's fascinating.
That is one of the things in Dark Majesty that absolutely, I mean, it shocked me to realize there are systems of mind control, alchemy, magic, that are now being used. They're being used by the mass media, by the networks, the news programs, in our books, our children, in our schools. These things are planned, propagandistic methods.
Brainwashing.
Brainwashing, that's really what it is.
Metaphysics.
But it's metaphysics, it's magic, it's alchemy, it's Masonic mind control. And that's one of the things that are really covered in Dark Majesty. There's several chapters because I want people to understand the mechanics of how they're being controlled. Now, I also want people to understand, just as you stated earlier in the program, that God has secrets. He knows these things that the adversary is doing. He wants to share these secrets with his people. And I believe, J.R., that's why you had the courage, and I'm so appreciative of your courage in inviting me on this program. This is a hot thing, let me tell you.
Yes.
There are people out there,
are things
who would threaten your life.
Yeah, there are things you've talked about in this book that we're not going to air on the program.
Well, I hope they get the book. I hope they get the tape so they can have a clear, a complete picture, because it's very scary. And yet, in a way, J.R., it's hopeful when we know it leads to the greatest of all events, the coming of the blessed hope.
And on page 33, you said, men cannot be allowed to discover the horrible truth that the democracy, which they all so vitally crave, clamor for, and demand, is, like some fantastic global shell game, only a mental concoction dreamed up by a tiny but ruthless band of hidden persuaders and master illusionists. This is exactly what you're saying, that they are fooling everybody. You see, what I get from this book is those who want to rule the world are motivated by greed.
They are indeed. Greed. But isn't it true, J.R., that, you know, I once read the Bible in Timothy where it talked about the love of money being the root of all evil. And I thought of it at that time as sort of a, excuse me for saying this, and I want people to understand, but it is so simple in a sense, the love of money being the root of all evil, that I thought it was almost like a Benjamin Franklin maxim, an Irish proverb. But you know, there is a profound nature in that. If the love of money is the root of all evil, and if Satan is evil, and he has a world conspiracy of both demonic agents and human agents on planet Earth today, then what would be the very root of this conspiracy? Well, if we know God's Word, it would have to be money.
Yes.
And then when we turn to the book of James, I've reread James again and again, a very small book.
Yeah,
but James said something so fantastic. He said, in the last days, there would be certain rich men who would gain their great wealth through fraud.
Yes.
They're going to defraud the working men. There are people out there that say, I don't understand why I'm losing my job. I don't understand why our factories are going overseas, why we're being leveled with other nations. It's because these rich men gain their great wealth through fraud, through ripping off the average person, the average Christian even, that they're listening to us. And James, though, gave a great warning to these men. He said, these men, you're heaping up treasures for the last days. And then he said, someday, you, and he's talking to the rich men here now that are doing these things that we're documenting in Dark Majesty, these conspirators. James said this. He said, someday you will howl in your misery. I feel sorry.
Yeah.
I feel sorry, JR, for the people right now who are out of work, who are hurting, who know something is terribly amiss in society. And we're going to reveal why these things are amiss. But I feel even more sorry for these pitiful, rich men who are defrauding. And James said they would even kill the just. We're seeing assassinations and murders from JFK to many more today because these men are seeking to gain total control of the world.
On page 34, Texe writes, "My investigation has revealed that almost all of the world's secret societies, banking and financial organizations, crime syndicates, intelligence agencies, and occult groups have merged. All now come under the direct command and authority of the elite executive council of the secret brotherhood. Never before in the annals of human history has so much power been reposited in the hands of so few." That's an incredible statement, Texe, that you say they've all merged now. The mafia's merged with the rest of the guys, huh?
We've seen that, for example, one of the areas that I cover is banking scandals and debacles and what it means for our money and dark majesty. We've seen this in this BCCI thing. It has come out now that among those who were using BCCI for their own evil means includes the Central Intelligence Agency, the Arab terrorist, and the sheikhs of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. We find certain politicians in the United States using BCCI. We're finding the KGB had conduits, banking scandal people. We're seeing Manuel Noriega, the drug kingpins of South America. They all use the same bank. Isn't it? It's not your neighborhood bank,
No.
I might emphasize.
It's incredible. On page 43, you talked about solar men, solar tradition, and the new Rome. And I read, in 1984, the same group of 9 influential leaders of the Illuminati met once again in France. Renewing their vows, they dedicated themselves to their goal of a new world order to encompass the entire globe. These 9 individuals believed themselves to be a sacred nobility and forebears of the new type of man, and they gave their order a new name, International Order of Chivalry, Solar Tradition. Tell us, what is this solar man?
You know, JR, this world conspiracy in these last days really can be traced, the roots of it, all the way back to paganism and ultimately to Mystery Babylon. But it also, that religion at that time, and there's a religion of the Illuminati. And in Dark Majesty, I talk about the religion. What is the religion of the Illuminati? They worship a god whose name they conceal. The ancients worshiped the sun god. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Babylonians worshiped the sun god. Now, they did not actually believe that the sun itself was God so much, but the sun was the symbol of their God. You remember in the Bible where Paul talked about the idols, why people should not pay homage to idols. He stated that it was not the idol of wood or stone or metal, but there were demon spirits behind those idols of wood, stone, and other materials. So as, for example, in Christianity, we don't worship the cross, but we recognize God who gave his life on the cross for us. So the cross has an important symbolic meaning for Christians, but we don't worship it literally. Likewise, those in these secret societies that I talk about in Dark Majesty, the Bilderbergers, the Skull and Bones Societies, the Knights of Malta, and many other groups, and especially this new group, the Solar Tradition, they do not worship the sun itself in terms of just a material body.
But use it as a metaphor?
It is a metaphor. It is the symbol, just as the cross to us. The sun represents their great God. The great energy force of the sun represents the great God of energy, the God of forces, the God, the false God of light. And so we get back to this, the God of light. We know Jesus as the light of the world, but they say, no, our God, Lucifer. And by the way, they don't often use that name, but he is the God of light. Paul said he was an angel of light. He comes disguised as an angel of light. But you see, this is where we get into the solar tradition, the sun. Now, the amazing thing about this is that there are followers here on earth, and especially these men, the 9 who are running this conspiracy, and the several hundred others, especially right below them. They are points of light within the greater sun. There are lesser lights, but there is the great central sun god. And then they are the lesser lights. So there is a networking of these so-called light bearers. So we have to understand, it's very,
Esoteric.
understandable. It is an esoteric thing. But in a way, the cross is esoteric, and it's a symbolic thing. But it's also, there is a great meaning, significance. There is reality. There is an entity behind this sun, and his name is Lucifer, and he is truly the one whom these people worship in their so-called solar tradition. Now, they believe in the enlightenment of men. There we have the Illuminati. That means the illumined ones. They have the light. Therefore, they're illumined, and their great work, and this is the scary thing that I talk about in Dark Majesty, J.R. They say they have a goal. They call it the great work. And the great work for them is the illumination of all mankind by the year 2000. So here again we have enlightenment, illumination, the solar tradition, the sun.
Don't we have some doublespeak here? Because instead of illuminating men's minds, aren't they trying to hoodwink the human race?
Well, that is an interesting thing. I talk about the ritual for Skull and Bones Society, about how a person lays in a coffin, and they have a blindfold put over their eyes. And in a sense, you're absolutely right. That's what they're doing to humanity. That's why the title of this book is Dark Majesty. But isn't it interesting that this secret brotherhood comes disguised as wonderful men who care for the earth and its environment, who want to give us a world government so that we can all be one, we can all live together in harmony. So it sounds really inviting and really great.
On page 45, you said here, a conspiracy is more likely to occur in our era than in any other era in history. Why now?
A lot of people, J.R., I've gone on many secular, non-Christian radio and television programs, and they say, I just can't believe that there are these rich, powerful men sitting in some smoke-filled room plotting the end of the world. Well, of course, I laugh at that myself because there is no such conspiracy as that. But the fact is that today there need not be such a conspiracy. First of all, there are a lot of men who don't smoke today, but getting to the more serious
No more smoke-filled rooms.
Oh, no more smoke-filled rooms, that's right. But it's the women that seem to smoke today. But in any case, look at the technology we have today. I mean, Jerry, in Austin, where I am, in Oklahoma City, you and I can teleconference with television screens. We can talk at instantaneous time. So they do these kinds of things. They also have computer networks working together.
And they're rich enough to own satellites, too, aren't they?
Oh, of course, they own satellites.
Instant communications.
Instant communications, and they have spy networks. They may know what their opponents are talking about at any given time through the CIA, the KGB, and other spy agencies whom they control, the Interpol in Europe and such. So this is an incredible apparatus of worldwide proportions. So with the transportation, the jets we have today, these men all have executive jets. They don't necessarily have to file flight plans like you and I might have to do. So there's all types of technology they use. And by the way, as you know, with computer technology today, and you can use certain codes so that people can't break into it. People know that in the cable system, if you try to get a channel that you're not paying for, it's scrambled. Well, the same principle applies. They have means of scrambling their messages. In the Air Force, I was commander of a communications group over in Germany. And we had many top secret communications. In fact, when Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State, and many others would come to Europe, we set up their telephone and their communications networks. It was our job. The men who worked for me did that. And they would use what is called cryptographic encoding equipment so that Henry Kissinger could send cables all over the world, whether behind the Kremlin or to Bonn, Germany, or to there in Great Britain, or back, of course, to the choke points, you might say, at the White House and at the Pentagon. And no one could read these things. No one could break in because they were encoded. They were using cryptological methods. And so the same thing is true for these men. They have a fantastic communication system. And one of the men of the black nobility in Europe can communicate with someone from the Skull and Bones Society or the Bilderbergers, for example, in Washington, D.C., at any moment, at any time. And this is the aspect of the conspiracy that so many people
This is why it's more likely today in our generation than in any generation in the past, because they can get around so much quicker.
That's right. And here again we have the Bible. In the last days, men will run to and fro. Knowledge will be increased. And certainly this is the case today. The opportunity level is greater than ever before in history. The borders are being erased. So we have a transnational, international situation that's really just almost incomprehensible to the human mind.
In chapter 3, you opened the chapter with the title, What International Evil Lurks in Vaults of Banks. You said few would debate the proposition that if there is a great world conspiracy that surrounds us, money and its acquisition is at the heart of it. Money is the root of all evil, isn't it? Money
is. And the one, you know, people ask me how I began to learn of this conspiracy. J.R., as you know, I wrote a number of books exposing the New Age movement. Now, the New Age isn't just Shirley MacLaine and spirit channeling and crystals. It's much deeper than that. But there were many organizations, world peace organizations, so-called, world disarmament, one world type organizations. And these had incredible organizations set up worldwide. And obviously they had millions of dollars being pumped into them. And I wanted to know, where did they get their money? And that's where I began to look, the money trail. You remember the Watergate scandal? The Washington Post reporters, Woodward and Bernstein,
yes,
they had Deep Throat, remember that? The confidant who was telling them things secretly. They asked their informant, Deep Throat, they said, how can we get to the bottom of the Watergate scandal that goes all the way to the White House, possibly? You know what his answer was? Follow the money.
Money, yeah.
So we have the money. So when you get into the international banking, when you get into the financial centers, Wall Street, Switzerland, Zurich, the International Bank of Settlements, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, when you get to these agencies, you begin to find some incredible things. One of the things I talk about is a group that most people have never heard about, but they meet each year very privately, a small group of rich men in Davos, Switzerland. It's called the World Economic Forum. These men meet. They plot out our financial future. What's going to happen to the American economy, to the German interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. And I am convinced their plan at this moment, sometime after this next election, they're going to pull the plug on our economy. And we're going to see a crash, a money crash, that will startle this nation. It's been planned. And the reason why is simply this. To bring everybody into the New World Order, they've got to level everybody. Americans would never give up our prosperity. But if they take away our prosperity and slowly give it to others and then suddenly have a crash, Americans in their misery, they say, will cry out. We need solutions. The men of the World Economic Forum, and I name those men in this book, they are ready to take over at that time.
You know, when the communists took over, the ideology of communism was that everybody has a piece of the pie, and everyone works for the good of the whole. This is the same concept that these men who are planning a one-world government have. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that communism in the early 1900s was set up by them as an experiment. But that experiment failed terribly because there's one thing they failed to understand, and that is the heart of man. A man wants to be able to put money in his pocket and clothes on his back and food on his table. He wants a TV and a refrigerator and an automobile. And, you know, they just didn't have that. They couldn't get it because the government was tied up in the hands of the bureaucracy, and the men who were running it, they saw to it that they got all the money that came through their hands, and the average person didn't get any. And that's what's going to happen when this New World Order comes into being. Men will be enslaved, and it will sound good, talk a good game. When it gets right down to it, there's going to be widespread poverty. In fact, this world government that's coming, the Bible says, will only be for 3.5 years. I mean, it won't take long for it to just, absolutely, it'll be a house of cards to crumble. And when those rich men, you know, in James chapter 5, that keeps back by fraud and holds back money, builds up the money for the last days, when they get everything in their control, they won't know what to do with it. That's what's so fascinating about this whole thing. These conspirators, and I guess that's the only way we can describe them, these international bankers, if you just take a look at them, for example, they loan money to third world countries, and the little potentates of those third world countries puts it in their Swiss bank accounts, you know, and the people of that country remain in poverty. And when the third world country gets to where it cannot pay back its debt to the international bankers, they don't know what to do about it. In fact, many of the big banks were in danger of crumbling. Like the BCCI crumbled. Why? Because even though those men were a part of the conspiracy to take over the world, they failed to understand the heart of man. And so when they loaned the money out and they didn't get it back, they didn't know what to do. And they're actually going to fail of their own means. In other words, they're going to be given enough rope, they'll hang themselves. That's really the bottom line, I think. Here in chapter 5, on page 99, we have this meeting of the Bilderbergers in June of 1991. David Rockefeller said in his opening statement in Baden-Baden, Germany, I guess that's the way you pronounce it, isn't it?
It's Baden-Baden.
Baden-Baden. Well, it looks like Texas, Texas Baden-Baden to me. So anyway, he said, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years." I read this on our last program, but I think it should be repeated now, because these people are in the business of keeping us informed. The Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and they literally sat on the story. And how for 40 years?
They have for 40 years. Their heads are invited, among the 200 or so notables, so-called, that are invited to these secret meetings of this group called the Bilderberger Group. They met in June 1991 at Baden-Baden, Germany. They recently met again at Evian, France. And some of the richest men in the world are there, and a few invited media, people that they direct to do their bidding. But these media, now here's what's amazing, and what is I think people ought to be angry about this. There were 3 U.S. senators at the last meeting that I know of. There were 2 governors, one whom is very prominent in the news today, whose name I won't mention, but again, he is mentioned in Dark Majesty. And if you ask these men what went on at the meeting, they will say no comment, because they all took an oath of secrecy. Secrecy, to keep this hidden. And I think this is unconscionable. Did you know that even the head of the chairman of the economic advisors for the White House was there? The budget director for the White House, for the whole federal government. We're talking about Mr. Dorman and Mr. Boskin. They were there. They flew there at our expense. These senators flew there at taxpayer expense. But ask them what went on, and they say, "I'm sorry, I took a vow of silence." And I think that's a travesty. Why do they have to hide what they're doing at these Bilderbergers meetings? I'll tell you why. Because they're plotting something that they know the American people would not go along with if it was out in the open.
In chapter 14 on page 239, you spoke of magic and alchemy. Alchemy, from history, historically, is supposedly these men who were able to take base metals, such as lead, and turn it into pure gold. But that's really just a metaphor, isn't it, for another type of alchemy, the true alchemy. Tell us about that.
The true alchemy is to take men and women and turn them into a new type of man or woman. This is what is so fantastic and so evil, the story that I unmask in Dark Majesty. In these secret societies, first of all, you have to understand these men are picked almost from birth to be part of these groups.
Yes.
Intergenerational, very rich men.
Yes.
But at a certain time, they go through a certain ritual. There is a rite of passage. And they are literally born again.
Yeah.
Now, you know the experience we have as a Christian, a wonderful experience. Jesus Christ comes in our heart. But for these men, it's a different experience. The false light, straight from hell, comes flooding into their very existence. And they literally, you know, from what I have seen here in my investigation, they have a born-again experience, but a blackness and darkness. And this sets them on this path to true deception. And this really is the ultimate in alchemy. But then they turn around, and their goal is the illumination of all mankind. In other words, they want men to receive, all men to receive, this same kind of transformation, this turning about of soul and spirit, so that men will enthusiastically support this new world order. That's really the new alchemy.
You remember back in the last century, the story of the devil and Daniel Webster. The story is this man sold his soul to the devil for money. The devil would make him rich as long as at the end of his life he could have the man's soul. That is exactly, there's more truth than fiction there. That is exactly what's happening through this international conspiracy to establish a one-world government, a one-world economic system, and a one-world religion. There's so many things we need to talk about in this book. We're going to do 2 more half-hour studies in this book, but in these next 2 studies, which will not be aired on television, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts, to talk about names, dates, places, people. It's going to be absolutely incredible. It's something so explosive we cannot talk about on television. But I would like for you to get those other 2 interviews that we're going to do, because all 4 of them, the 2 you've heard on television and the 2 that expose the secret brotherhood, will be on this cassette tape. We want to send it to you for a gift of $10 to the Ministry of Prophecy and the News. We'll be telling you how you can get it in just a few moments. We also want to offer this book, Dark Majesty by Texe to you. And 288 pages, the last 13 pages are filled with his footnotes and the documentation on the things that are in this book. There are some absolutely startling things that are in this book. We cannot afford to talk about them. This is an election year, and I just don't feel led that we should talk about it on television, but I really hope you will get this book and find out what's in it. And then, of course, I have produced a video called What in the New World Order is Going On? I hope you'll get this one too. We'll tell you how you can get all of these when we come back in just a few moments. Tex, thanks for sharing with us the things that are in this book, and especially about the secret brotherhood.
Thank you very much, J.R.
We'll be back after these announcements.
In today's Middle East, events change daily. In this turmoil, global finance and politics play a major but confusing role. To help you understand today's news from a prophetic perspective, J.R. Church publishes a monthly newspaper. You'll enjoy his latest research in Bible prophecy. Order an introductory subscription today absolutely free just by calling 1-800-475-1111. When the operator answers, just say that you'd like to receive an introductory subscription to Prophecy in the News. We'll mail you the next 6 issues free with our compliments. Call toll-free 1-800-475-1111 or write to Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153. Prophecy in the News wants you to stay informed, so call or write today. Again, that address is Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153.
I want to thank you for watching this very, very important story of the men who would rule over us, the secret brotherhood. And I want you to have a copy of this book, Dark Majesty, the Secret Brotherhood and the Magic of 1,000 Points of Light. I believe we can save many in these last days. We can certainly let people know of the coming of Christ. There is an Illuminati, a secret brotherhood. And this all fits in with Bible prophecy. For your gift of $12 or more, we'll send you this book, Dark Majesty, 15 chapters, almost 300 pages. Just write to us and send us your gift of $12 or more to Living Truth Publishers, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. That's Living Truth Publishers, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. If you want to use your Visa or MasterCard, simply call toll-free at no charge to you. That's 1-800-234-WORD, 1-800-234-WORD. Now that's W-O-R-D, WORD, 1-800-234-WORD. And when you call or write, I want to give you a free gift, Flashpoint, our monthly newsletter. I know it'll be a blessing to you. We talk about Bible prophecy, world conspiracies, about some political events you're not going to hear about unless you get Flashpoint. Totally free. For your subscription, just call that toll-free number, 1-800-234-WORD, or write to us, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. Again, for your love gift of $12 or more, the book Dark Majesty, but the subscription to Flashpoint is totally free. I want you to know the truth, because Jesus said, the truth shall make you free. Until next time, this is Texe Mars saying, may God richly bless you and your family.
This program is a production of Prophecy in the News Incorporated. For more information and a free copy of our newspaper, write to J.R. Church at Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153. And join us again next time for Prophecy in the News.